Welcome to another episode of Raven Conversations. I'm Josie Mandel, State Public Affairs Officer for the Washington National Guard. And today I'm joined by Staff Sergeant Sydni Murphy. She is the Marketing NCO at Recruiting and Retention Battalion here on Camp Murray. And you're also a platoon sergeant with the 181 BSB in the Transportation Platoon. And she's here to share her Guard story coming off active duty, how she came into the Guard, your education journey, and just some of the things you've learned along your way being in the service. So we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so intro background on yourself.
Wow. So again, my name is Staff Sergeant Sydni Murphy. I am the platoon sergeant over in 181. I'm in transportation. I'm in 88 Mike. So I lead a platoon of 88 Mikes alongside my platoon leader. I've been in the Guard for 3 years approximately. Prior to that, I had a 3-year break in service. And prior to that, I was in active duty for about 5 years. I was stationed in Georgia. I was stationed in Hawaii. And then I came here with my husband after I got out.
Yeah. So I always like to ask, how'd you learn about the Guard?
It's funny. So I got out of active duty. I joined at 18, and obviously I was a single 18-year-old kid. Went to my first duty station, had a great time, and then, life happens. I got married, we had kids, and I started missing a lot of things, and so that was very important to me, and we kind of had a conversation and decided that one of us needed to get out because we both missed my daughter's first birthday, first words, first steps, and we were like, something's got to give. So at that point, I had already finished a bachelor's degree, and I was working on a second bachelor's degree, so it just made sense for me to get out. He's a forward observer. He absolutely loves his job, always has loved his job. So, I got out. We moved to Washington. The great pandemic happened, and I went from working at and attending Pierce College, doing some prereqs for my master's, to the school shutting down. So I was no longer attending class in class. We didn't know what that looked like. No one knew what anything looked like, right? I lost my job because I was also working at Pierce College, and the college shut down. So everything just kind of halted, and I was forced to be a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids. At that time, I think Kenna was not even 2, and then my older daughter was in kindergarten. So I became a kindergarten teacher with a baby, and it was hard, right? Like, I never planned on teaching kindergarten. I never planned on being a stay-at-home mom. I never planned on homeschooling. So being thrown into that with the uncertainty of work and my school, I was still trying to work through a master's program or start a master's program. It was just a lot. And so I was driving by Target one day in Sunrise Village, trying to get the kids out of the house. I think we went to the park beforehand and got coffee. And I passed the Sunrise Village recruiting office. And I had thought a couple times about, man, I really wish I was back in uniform. But I just knew that it was not the best thing for my family. And so I toyed with the idea, and I was like, well, maybe I could do it in a part-time capacity. But the first thing that came to mind was I do receive a VA disability percentage. And I had never known anyone in the Guard or spoken to anyone in the Guard. Active duty was my first path the whole time. So I thought, well, I can't be in the Guard if I receive a VA disability percentage. It's probably not going to work out. And I think I drove by that office 5 times before I finally went in, and I met Sergeant Egan and some of the other recruiters there. And that was the first thing I said is I receive a VA disability percentage. And they're like, no problem. And it kind of just I kept giving them problem after problem after problem. And I quickly realized that the Guard is almost willing to accommodate anything. So the fact that I was a disabled veteran was okay. It required waivers and some workarounds, but it was fine. The fact that I got chaptered from active duty for a family care plan chapter didn't matter. I just had to reproduce a family care plan that was valid. No problem. The fact that my husband was deployed 6 months out of the year because he was in the SFAB, and maybe I couldn't attend a certain drill weekend, not a problem because we have SUDAs. So it just seemed too good to be true.
So there was always an obstacle you were throwing up, it sounded like.
It was
that they were
me.
Nope, these are easy.
I was like, well, I can't do this because of this. And they were like, well, that's not a problem. I'm like, okay, what about this? Well, that's not a problem. And so I went to MEPS, and I came into the Guard. And then conveniently, as I was coming in, they had a full-time position open up at the recruiting office for an assistant. And I was looking for a job during the pandemic. So I ended up working for them.
Yeah. So talk about that coming back into the Guard. You're expecting to be a part-time soldier probably, and you're offered a full-time position. What was that like?
At first, I was very, very excited. And then I was like, okay, let's take a step back and remember, why I separated in the first place, my dreams, my goals. and how that aligns with, putting back on the uniform. I talked to my husband about it because he is deployed all the time. And between the work schedule and the flexibility, and being, paid full-time E5 pay at the time to be a recruiter assistant, it just made sense. So at that time, I was done with my prerequisites at Pierce College. I was not really working for Pierce College anymore. So that additional full-time, active duty income was like a godsend. And it was a great job. It was very flexible. It was a lot of fun. I got to put back on the uniform full-time. I got to talk to recruits, go to high schools and colleges, host events, help the recruiters with stuff. So it was really cool.
Yeah. So what led you into the marketing job?
So I was a recruiter assistant for, I think, 2 years. And then our marketing person, Sergeant Davina, we had a change of command, and he is a master badge. And so he's very, important to the field. And they decided to send him back out to the field to be a leader and, get some people in the Guard and help other people get people in the Guard. And so I got promoted to E6. And at that time, being an E6, recruiter assistant, it was kind of towing the line of not really acceptable. It's kind of a position of a specialist normally. So one of the things they asked me was, would you be willing to take the marketing position with the understanding that I am not an AGR and I'm not a 79 Tango. So at some point, they'd be looking for a replacement. And I was like, I would love to do it.
Yeah. So for those, you were not promoted into that position as an E6. You were actually promoted on your MDays side into an E6 position, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's, I think, always a misnomer that a lot of people don't understand about their full-time.
Yes.
If they're not an AGR, their promotions are all based on their MDay capacity.
Yep.
So talk about your traditional Guard job over in the 181.
Yeah, so I came in as a team leader, as a team leader as an E5, and then became a squad leader. And then, promotions happen every year. And so we lost our E7. He ended up taking the truck master spot. We had the platoon sergeant slot open up. There are a couple of us that were eligible. I was not actually the highest ranking person, but I was the person who accepted it. And so I went from being a team leader to a platoon sergeant in 2 years, got promoted to E6 and led the platoon. I've been doing that for about 6 months now. So I got to take them through an annual training exercise, multiple drill weekends. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And that's the reason I've stayed ADOS, is because I didn't want to be AGR. I didn't want to be a recruiter. I didn't want to stay full-time forever. So I knew it didn't benefit me to be an AGR. It benefited me to further my career as an 88 Mike and promote in that area, since that's where inevitably I'm going to end up back in. Mm-hmm. So the ability to do that and have that flexibility has been really cool.
Yeah. And you were talking about you've now got your master's degree.
Yep.
And your goal is to be so you are a certified nutritionist.
Yes.
Through that program. And your goal is to be a nutritionist somewhere. So talk about that education journey you've taken.
So when I came in at 18, I joined the Army for the education benefits. That's why I went active duty in the first place. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to be like the first generation college graduate of my family. And I didn't know what that looked like. I knew that my parents couldn't pay for college. I have a twin and I have 2 other siblings, so it just was not in the cards. And so I joined the Army. I got to Fort Stewart, and I just started going to school. And I went through a general education or general studies program, associate's program, and I just kept knocking out the core classes. Mm-hmm. And then I got pregnant, and I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And that was very, very, very hard. And through that journey, I became just fascinated with biochemistry, and the science behind what we eat, when we eat, how we move our bodies, how just everything impacts, our biochemistry. And I switched into a bachelor's of nutrition science program through Purdue. And then from there, I finished a bachelor's of health and wellness program also through Purdue. And then I separated from the Army. And then I kind of was waffling back and forth as to whether I wanted to be a registered dietitian and direct commission back into active duty. But I had to take a hard look at myself and be like, this is why you separated. Now we have another kid. I do want to be present for them. So instead of doing that, I decided to go into a more holistic program. So my master's is in human nutrition and functional medicine. So I'm not a registered dietitian, but that allows me to work in more of a holistic capacity as a certified nutritionist.
Yeah. So what do you want to do with that degree? Excuse me.
Yeah. So I've thought a lot about it. There's a lot of state by state because I'm not a registered dietitian, which is like a national recognition. Certified nutritionist is recognized state by state. So there's different standards state by state. So while we're here in the state of Washington, I would love to work with soldiers eventually in the H2F program. But ideally, I think I want to work, like there's a functional medicine clinic in Puyallup. There's a couple in Seattle. And basically, it's just like a root cause approach to medicine, healing people of things like thyroid disorders and diseases, diabetes, different autoimmune conditions, and then at some point work with soldiers.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. I'm always very fascinated. My wife and I kind of do the same thing. We look at what you put in your body, I think, is kind of what you get out of it, too.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
if you're putting in garbage, you're probably going to get garbage out. But if you're putting in good stuff, you're going to probably do very well. So I imagine that's probably a lot of what your advice to others would be, too.
Yeah, and especially soldiers, because people don't think about it, but we are athletes, right? Even the Guard soldier, like our ability to perform and our physical health and our flexibility and our mental health and all of these things, like they play into how we show up as a soldier and how we, show up as a leader. And it's, if nothing else, people are doing an ACFT twice a year, once a year. And so that is a very, demanding event. So I think it's really important that we take care of ourselves. And then obviously just if you look around between the pandemic and everything that's followed after that, like there's a need for nutrition professionals in this country. There's a need for a lot of change, like in policy around nutrition in this country. So it's just, it's a really exciting field to get into right now.
Yeah. So you kind of let us know you're eventually leaving the marketing position here in the near future, but you're going to continue to serve in the Guard. What's that future kind of look like for you as you're moving forward?
Yeah. I'm actually outgoing, so my replacement's already here. She's going to do great things. She has a background in marketing, so I'm really excited that they chose her. I'll probably go back to an MDay position in the near future and then start my own practice as a certified nutritionist and then also start gathering. I have to have 1,000 supervised hours to become a certified nutrition specialist, and that's a title that I'm going after, so start getting after those hours.
I think one of my last questions to you, and you've kind of had an extensive career to this point, coming off active duty and making that hard decision, right? Like for your family, but then making that decision to come back to service. So what is that message you want to share to those that are kind of coming off active duty? That are like, hey, I'm done serving because my family, but they still have that desire. What's that message you want to share?
I think the first message is just like, don't count yourself out, right? Because when I first got out, I'm like, I really want to do this thing, but there's just no way. Like, I just can't because of all of these things. And a lot of times I feel like if something is on your heart and like, again, like I said, I would drive past the recruiting office and I would always think like, man, it'd be nice to be in uniform again. But I just counted myself out. So if something is like on your heart like that, just pursue it. Ask the questions, get in front of somebody, whether it's a recruiter, a friend, somebody on a Facebook group that's in the Guard, because it's a lot more possible than you'd think. And then the second thing is the transition from active duty. Anyone who's gotten out of active duty, it's hard. It's very hard. Like just not even necessarily financially, but oftentimes financially, but just the mental aspect of being a part of this thing that is all encompassing. It takes over your entire life. Like arguably it's your identity, right? Like you eat, sleep, breathe the Army, and then you take off that uniform. And even if you work a civilian job around other, prior service people, or if you work, in a similar thing that you did as your MOS, it's a culture shock. It's very rough. And I know that because I had 3 years of a break in service. And probably for at least 2 of those 3 years, I was like, man, I miss it. And I don't miss, sleeping on the ground, kind of. But I miss being around soldiers. I miss being around NCOs, I miss being around officers, I miss the communication style that we have that, you don't find anywhere else. The Guard provided that in a smaller dose. So it allows like the transition out of active duty, even if you don't plan on retiring, it allows that transition to be a lot softer and easier while you kind of navigate the waters and transition into whatever civilian role you're gonna have. Or you join the Guard after active duty, you love it, and you do end up retiring. That's a really common path that I had no idea about until I showed up at 181. And I think all of our all of our E5s and higher, I want to say, are prior service.
Yeah.
Because there's so many of us. And it's because it's such a great opportunity.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic message. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
No, we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
If you want to know more about the transition from active duty to the National Guard, we can definitely put information in the notes. I know there's a ton of websites, and I think the nationalguard.com or website has a lot of that information. If you like the video, give it a like. If you want to learn more, add a comment, and make sure to subscribe for future videos. Thanks. We appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.